Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 539th episode of Travel Itch Radio. And there goes our music again. Unbelievable. Let me cut that out real quick. Sorry about that, folks. It loves to do that to us. So much for the professionalism right there, but let me get to it. 539th episode of Travel Itch Radio. I'm your host, Roger Noriega. Substituting, as you can tell, for Dan Schlossberg, and we're the 13th season of Travel Itch Radio, the show that lets you enjoy the pleasures of travel from the comfort of your armchair. Every week at this time, we talk to people representing destinations, hotels, airlines, railroads, car rental companies, and others in the world of travel and hospitality, from authors and bloggers to broadcasters and publicists. If it's got anything to do with travel, it's got everything to do with Travel Itch Radio. My guest tonight is food and travel writer Kurt Jacobson. Welcome, Kurt, to Travel Itch Radio.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
I'm glad that you're here with us, and I understand that you wear many hats: chef, traveler, and freelance writer. How do you keep so many balls in the air at the same time?
Well, I don't do them all at once.
That's good. That definitely works. Now, you cover Alaska a lot, which I should have been ready for that. I'm not sure if I mentioned to you earlier, but I was in Alaska back in April of 2022. I spent about, I think it was 10 days in Anchorage. Best time of my life. And I went out there, but maybe we can get to that in a moment. I do apologize. You cover Alaska a lot. It's a big state with lots of stories, but do you go there in summer as well as winter?
I used to live there full time, so I was there in winter. But when I moved out of Alaska to the lower 48, I never went back up for the winter. I only went up the next 17 out of 18 years to fish in the summer and visit my friends.
Wow. When you mention Alaska, I instantly think of the Northern Lights, and I missed out on them by 1 week. Have you seen them, and what are they like? I imagine you have.
Yeah, well, I spent a year in the Coast Guard at a Loran station up there, and we were just south of the Arctic Circle. And I saw the Northern Lights several times, and it was my first time to see them. I'd previously been on Kodiak Island in the Coast Guard, never saw the Northern Lights there. But up by the Arctic Circle, yeah, it was really cool. And yet, you see these ads for traveling to places and see the Northern Lights, but you can get skunked, and a lot of people do. And I took my wife to Sweden 2 weeks ago to see the Northern Lights. And on a scale of 1 to 10, the night that we saw them, it was a 1 at best.
Understood. Now, in Alaska, I understand that 1 out of every 3 people that go to Denali National Park actually get to see. Is that correct? 1 out of every 3?
I think that's pretty close. I mean, that mountain hides in the clouds a lot.
Well, that's my next question. Have you seen Mount McKinley, or was it shrouded in clouds?
Oh, more times than I could even count. I've seen Mount McKinley.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking to food and travel writer Kurt Jacobson, and I do want to give a quick shout out to ARC54. Thank you for joining us. Folks, don't forget, let us know who you are and where you hail from. Leave a comment in the chat room, and if you do have a question, we may be able to get to it. And here at Travel Itch Radio, we love trains. Yes, Dan and I do have that in common, which brings up the question, have you ridden the Alaskan Railroad, and if so, did you enjoy it?
I did ride it. It was the goofiest thing to me. It was back when that was the only way you could get a car to Whittier, Alaska easily, and you'd go up there and hop the train car on this weird ramp, go for a whopping, I don't know, what was it, 25-minute ride, pop out of this tunnel, see this towering behemoth called the Baggage Towers, an old World War II building. I think it's about 7 or 8 stories tall, maybe more. And boom, there was the beautiful Prince William Sound. And so that was the only train ride I've done in Alaska, but I'll never forget it. And I did it a couple of times.
I bet. When I was there in April, I didn't have a chance to ride it, and I'm looking forward in the future to doing so. I was outside that tunnel, Kurt, and for some reason, I didn't go through. I don't know. I regret it now. But be that as it may, like Alaska, Colorado is a big and mountainous state, but also has cities, deserts, and plains. Have you covered both sides of the continental divide? And what are your favorite spots?
Well, I grew up in Colorado, and I was lucky to live in a family that loved hunting, fishing, and camping. So I've seen virtually every corner of the state and most everything in between. I've only been a travel writer for 8.5 years, but I've written several stories about Colorado since then. And yeah, people don't realize how scenic it is. Everybody loves the mountains; they're gorgeous. The Front Range is gorgeous. But on one of my trips that I drove from Baltimore to Colorado and back, on the way back, about an hour out of Denver, on Highway 34 or 36, I forget which it was, I started seeing antelope and deer and just the wide open prairie. And I realized how beautiful parts of the plains are.
I had the privilege of being in Colorado in 2007, so I did get a bit of that. I saw more wildlife in Alaska though. But if I may, let's switch gears for a second and head east. We know you've done everything from cover a mid-Atlantic farm to writing about the historic city of Baltimore. But Homicide and The Wire were filmed in Baltimore, so we'd like to know how safe it really is.
Well, you're talking to the right guy because I'm come from the safe parts of Colorado and Alaska. And when I moved here, I really wondered that myself. We had this furniture repairman come to our house. This was, 14 and a half years ago. And I asked him because I found out he was from Montana. I said, look, we're both from out west. Tell me, how true is all this? And this is from this guy who'd lived here several years at that point. He said, the Inner Harbor is safe. Go there, enjoy it. But anytime you go within 3 blocks away from the Inner Harbor, you just don't know. Now, I don't agree with that completely, having lived here all these years now. And I volunteered for weekend backpacks last year. And this group delivers to inner city schools backpacks of food on Fridays for kids that might not eat when they go home. Um, and you got all these people, most of us were 60, 70, maybe even in their 80s, driving to all these schools delivering 10 to 40 backpacks of food. And I never heard of anyone having a problem, and I didn't either. So
That's great.
daytime, I think it's plenty safe going just about anywhere in the city because I did. Nighttime, just like any city I've ever been in, there are places you probably ought not to go.
That's fair, and I appreciate it. That's good to know. Speaking of Maryland, it is known for superb wineries. Isn't Virginia wineries? Isn't Virginia the same? Sorry.
It's funny you say that because having gone to cook school in Sonoma County for years, this was back in the 70s, I went to cook school. And for years, I didn't think there was good wine outside of California, maybe Oregon and Washington. So when I moved here to Maryland, both my wife and I never even really considered going to a winery until we finally went to Bordy. We tasted it. It was mostly soda pop wine to us, that you start drinking as a gateway in your 18 to 20-year-old range. But then, as a travel writer, I dug deeper. And I went to the Comptroller's Cup Awards. And I met a guy, Al Spoler, who has a radio show called, Cellar Notes. And I said, Al, are there really any good wineries in Maryland? And he said, yes. And he wrote me a list of 5. I went to all 5, and they were all very good, with Black Ankle being absolutely the tops.
Black Ankle. Excellent. Good to know. Folks, I do want to thank everyone who's commenting. We may be able to get to your questions in the chat room. We are talking to food and travel writer Kurt Jacobson. Is it a love of history that convinces you to cover places like Washington, Baltimore, Philadelphia, and Boston?
That and the food.
Yes. Yeah, I think that would be the most important. Now, both off air and I think you may have mentioned, you said New Zealand is your favorite country to visit. Why New Zealand?
When I was living in the mountains of Colorado, a friend of mine, his wife was from there, and she'd tell me stories of her home country, and I'd sort of heard of it. I mean, come on, it's down there, the land down under, other than Australia. And so I wanted to go for years. When I met my second wife and we got married, we both agreed we wanted to go there for our honeymoon, and we both fell head over heels in love with the place.
Are you sorry for going out of script. Are you a Lord of the Rings fan?
Oh, absolutely.
Were you able to visit any of the sites down there in New Zealand?
You know, specifically, no, but I've been to many of those areas already because I've traveled both islands extensively in my 12 trips there.
Oh, wow. What was your longest stay, if I may ask? I know, really going off script. Sorry, Kurt.
Oh no, I'm not paying attention to the script. You just lead me wherever you want to go.
Appreciate
When we went on our honeymoon, that was our longest trip there. We had 3 whole weeks in the country, rented a camper van. I'd never driven on the wrong side of the road.
it.
We get there after a very long trip from Colorado to New Zealand, hop in a camper van, and I learned how to drive on the wrong side of the road, do traffic circles for the first time in 30 to 40 mile an hour winds.
Oh, wow.
It was
Wrong side of the road.
exciting.
Traffic circles that go in the opposite. Wow. That's crazy. Yeah, I bet it was exciting. And speaking of staying on the left, not any political commentary. I mean, on the left side of the road, you made about a dozen trips to Japan. Why so many? And do you plan to go again?
My wife's born and raised there till she was 5 years old. And when we got married, I thought, well, it's my family duty to go meet some of the relatives over there. I was not really that interested in going to Japan at the time.
Oh, wow.
We went. I met the relatives and friends of the family on about a 10-day or 2-week trip. I just fell in love with the place. And when we came back, I think it was the next day, I said, when can we go again?
Wow. Yeah, I thought the same thing of Alaska. Had a great time up there. Looking forward to returning myself, and I went on my own. So who knows? I'm hoping to do Japan in the future. I want to take a quick moment. We do have a question in the chat room, and this is from Arc54. Thank you, Liz. Okay, with your travels in different cultures, including your background of hunting. Oh, so our guest has done a bit of research there. What is your favorite cuisine to eat or cook?
Might be Filipino food because in the Coast Guard, I worked with many Filipino cooks that taught me their food and their love of gathering over a good meal.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Folks, if you have any other questions, fire them off. You're tuned to Travel Itch Radio, now in our 13th season with Roger Noriega filling in for Dan Schlossberg. Check us out on iTunes, LinkedIn, Instagram, or the Travel Itch Radio Facebook page, among other places. So, when you travel, do you go solo, with family, or press trips?
All of the above.
Oh, wow. That works. What about traveling with dogs? They're a lot of fun, but a lot of responsibility as well. How hard is it to find dog-friendly hotels, especially overseas?
Come on.
Oh,
Here,
yes. Perfect timing. Yes.
Yep. Say hi to the people. Who's a big German Shepherd? Loves to travel.
And
That's
that is
right.
the second. Okay, that's your dog. You also showed us a moment ago, well, when we were off air, your cat Hercules, correct?
Zeus. Mighty
Oh,
Zeus.
Zeus. Oh, I blew it. All right. Well, at least I stuck with the.
That's all right. You were close.
Thank you, Zeus. And the name of your dog?
That's Sophie. Sophie loves to travel with me, and she's in a lot of my travel stories because some of the places we go, whether it's a hotel or a town that's hosting me, they want to spotlight their dog-friendly, nature. And towns like Frederick, Maryland, are extremely dog-friendly and just a great place to take a dog. And so when I write about dog-friendly travel, I think about all of the important things like, okay, you have a dog-friendly property. How far out that door do you have to go to walk your dog to do their business? A lot of people don't think about that. Like when we stayed in downtown Baltimore, the first month we were here, we took our dog down to the hotel there with us. There wasn't any grass to be had for, a couple hundred yards. And so I had to get up on this traffic median with her and walk her on this tiny spot of grass. And so I'm really keenly aware of a lot of the dog needs when I write about dog-friendly travel.
Excellent. We're talking to food and travel writer Kurt Jacobson. Where can the Travel Itch Radio audience find your work, Kurt? Is it mainly for newspapers, or do you also do work for magazines and or online outlets?
I've written for over 60 online outlets, and I'm up to 10 magazines now. But to actually see a bunch of my work, my website is built mostly for editors to, as we say, vet me to make
Yes.
sure that I'm for real, and for DMOs, destination marketing organizations, to look at my body of work. So on my website, Taste of Travel 2, the digit, not spelled out, I have about 200, maybe 300 of my articles with links to them and the different places I've been. And one of the categories is hotels, because I've written 127 feature articles on hotels from New Zealand to Alaska and many places in between.
Excellent. I'm sending you a question if the website is correct in the chat field so we can put it online. I should have done this beforehand, and I apologize.
That is correct.
All right, folks, we're going to put this one in the chat room. Give me one quick moment, and we'll have it on screen in just a moment. And we'll see if I'm able to do several things at once, which I probably I am unable to. There it is, tasteoftravel2.com. So how do you balance your time? Do you write on the road or just take notes and then write when you get home?
I usually write when I get home, and just in the last year, I've used the old smarty phone to take some notes. But I find by taking a whole bunch of pictures, I can sit down and chronologically go through the photos on my phone or camera, and it just brings the whole trip back completely. And I sit down and hammer it out.
Now, you may have mentioned this to me while we were off air, but where is home and how much time do you actually spend there?
Perry Hall, Maryland.
Oh, wow.
And I spend most of the year here. I travel. Well, my wife gets 5 weeks of vacation, and then I'll do a couple of trips a year, maybe 3, about 5 days or less, solo. But I do a lot of day trips. The Mid-Atlantic has so much incredible history, food, and culture that I can reach so many places on a day trip. I can go to DC, I can go to Philly, I can go to Wilmington. I love Amish country up in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. And these are all very easy day trips. And I write about those because I think other people would be interested in those kind of trips too.
On a personal comment, Kurt, that's one thing that I regret. And I know this shouldn't be about me, but being on the West Coast, we have a lot of stuff that's close, but not in the quantity of where you're at. I mean, you're almost in the epicenter of the entire East Coast, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that works. And I am envious of that. Now, speaking of maybe something that wasn't envious, did the outbreak of the pandemic in 2022 interfere with your work?
Yeah, we went to Colorado in May of 2020, and there I was on the 16th Street pedestrian mall bus, and someone was coughing on the bus, and still didn't know that much about COVID, but I thought, oh, that's not good, and I got off at the very next stop. Got home 2 days later, I was walloped with COVID, and the whole country was starting to shut down. I took the whole year off.
Understood. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking to food and travel writer Kurt Jacobson. Besides New Zealand and Japan, what are some of your favorite places, foreign and domestic? How about favorite airlines, since you must rely on them a lot?
Yeah, good question. Both my wife and I like Europe. I love Spain. I've been there several times. We just got back 2 weeks ago from a trip to Sweden. We'd never been there. Found out that Stockholm's an amazing place to visit. And then within the U.S., my favorite places to visit are the old home state, Colorado. And I do love Oregon and Washington. I'd lived in Washington and the Tri-Cities for a while, and up around the Seattle area for a while.
Yes, that's a nice place. I went up there once to catch a baseball game. I think that's another thing Dan and I have in common. Now, knowing that we have cell phones, which are just incredible. I have to ask, is language your biggest problem on the road, or do you speak different languages? And also, what about converting money or figuring out, which, well, you mentioned earlier, figuring out which side of the road to drive on.
Languages, yeah. Well, lucky for me, I speak enough Spanish to be dangerous, and I learned in one of my Spanish classes that I'd never heard this before. I was taking a community college course in Spanish, and the teacher told us it's the most widely spoken language on the planet. There's more countries you can go to with that language than any other language. And so it comes in handy. I can get by and I can certainly read it better than I can speak it. And so if it's a Spanish country, speaking country, I do pretty well. In Japan, that's a tough one for people if they don't have someone like my wife who can speak it fairly well. And we both of us would be about lost without her parents that go to Japan with us because they're obviously fluent. And yeah, that's the toughest one is Japan.
Wow. No. Yeah, I bet. I don't know what I'm going to do when I go. So my daughter wants to go, but she's not fluent either. We're English and Spanish ourselves. Is foreign food an issue for you, or are you an Anthony Bourdain type who's willing to eat anything, even if he can't pronounce or identify it? Oh, wow.
Yeah, well, I'm closer to Anthony Bourdain on that than say Andrew Zimmer. That guy will eat guts and nasty stuff like
Anything.
crazy. I'll eat some strange things, and it was funny. It was in Japan. It was the sea snail that got me. I thought it looked really good. I saw them in several grocery stores, and I love shellfish and stuff like that. So my wife's uncle bought it for me, and he cooked it up. I thought, oh, this is going to be good. And I took a big old bite, and it was the nastiest thing I ever put in my mouth. And it was all I could do to be polite and chew it and swallow that. I had no idea a mollusk could be so incredibly foul tasting.
Interesting. I don't think I've ever had mollusk, but something similar, especially south of the border. I believe it's abalone.
Yeah.
It's rather common just south of Los Angeles in Tijuana,
Oh, yeah.
Rosarito. And yeah. So I guess it's really far from a mollusk then, right? Abalone
Yeah.
is actually it's all right.
And I'm
Not the
not sure
mollusk.
that this sea snail would be considered a mollusk, but I think it is. I don't. It's not a bivalve like a clam.
All right, fair enough.
Anyway, beware of little snail-looking things in the grocery store in Japan that look good but might not taste good.
Yeah, not wanting to be mean to anyone, but I want my food cooked and dead. So hopefully I'll be able to do well in Japan when I go. At Travel Itch, we love everything on tracks: trains, trolleys, subways, trams, funiculars, monorails, you name it. And we know from experience, European trains are great. Are you a rail fan as well?
Absolutely.
No.
Well, I grew up in Colorado, and the pinnacle was to ride the Durango Silverton Railroad, which I did when I was a kid. And then after my wife and I got married, we went down and visited friends of mine in Durango, and we rode the train to Silverton, and they gave us a ride back because it's a little much. It takes a long time to ride it to Silverton and hang out in town for a little while and then come back. And you've already seen all that scenery. So it was really special to have the fast ride back. But that was a lot of fun, and ridden just a few trains in Europe. I've been wanting to ride the trains in New Zealand from what is it, Auckland to Wellington, but we did do the Christchurch to Picton route, which was wonderful along the coast of the South Island.
Wow. Yes. If I may be so bold to ask, have you done maybe like the Canadian rail from, say, Toronto to Vancouver or anything like that yet?
No, I haven't, but that would be cool. Oh, and I did do the Potomac Eagle in Romney, West Virginia. That was a really nice ride.
Oh, I bet the scenery. I've seen quite a bit of it. That must have been fun and exciting. Wow. I envy you there on that one. I'm looking forward to flying to Toronto, taking Canadian Rail, then jumping across the border, and then going from Seattle all the way down to San Diego. I'm hoping to do that. I think it's in 2026 or 2025. Do you plan that far ahead? I do. I have trips planned years in advance.
I don't. Maybe a really big trip I'll plan a year or so in advance, but otherwise I plan most of my trips where I have to fly about 3 to 9 months out.
Good to know. I have a bucket list, and that's why I'm doing some of that. I'm going to be down in, hopefully, in 2031. I'm hoping to be down in New Zealand myself for the anniversary of the Lord of the Rings. We're not shills for Lord of the Rings, folks. We're just fans. So, just curious. But in a world that is growing increasingly political, have you had issues with people who aren't happy when they find out you're American?
No, I haven't, but we did have a really talkative cabbie in Sweden that was really spewing some dislike of Russians and Chinese. And I thought that was really interesting because here's my wife who's Japanese and he doesn't know if she's Chinese or Japanese. But luckily, yeah, she wasn't. But that was really interesting. And we had someone in New Zealand that really gave us an earful, like we needed to hear what their social welfare programs were because we have similar ones in the US. And that was kind of funny.
Yeah, that's interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking to food and travel writer Kurt Jacobson. Our viewers would love to know how you became a travel writer. So please tell us, if you're so inclined, where you were born, raised, and schooled, if we didn't discuss some of that already, and what you did before to get into travel journalism.
I was a chef for 20 years and had an intense love of all things food. And I quit after 20 years because my back was having enough of that. And I came down with a bad case of eczema. And my hands were cracked and bleeding, which is not a good thing when you're a cook. You know?
Right.
Yeah. And I was working in Cordova, Alaska on my last job there. Say hi, Mighty Zeus.
Hey, Zeus.
My lap needed warming. And my back was going out. My hands were going out. And I just had to throw up the white flag and say, I quit. But so, love of food, deeply instilled in me. I got into real estate, was in that for 20 years. The crash came in 2008, 2009, kind of kicked me in the assets.
Yeah.
And I was looking for something else to do with my life and my time. So I started a food blog, which is really kind of fun because I had not written down hardly any recipes and I made up hundreds and hundreds of them in my time cooking professionally.
Yes.
So here was a repository now of my recipes, but there was no money in it. And after about 5 years of it, I had transitioned into wanting to write about travel because I saw some top food bloggers posting stories about their trips. And then I found an online course to become a travel writer. And I did it, and I got almost nowhere with it. But that same company put on a 3-day training event once a year in a different city. And that particular year, it was in Denver, my hometown. From Baltimore to Denver, I went. 3 days later, I came out of there with almost everything I needed to become a professional travel writer. They were so good at what they did.
Excellent. Now, I feel there's an unfair question for me to ask because I've written none. Dan has written quite a few. How have you written any books about your travels, and do you plan to do so?
I have not, but I'm getting such a repository of lodging stories in the Mid-Atlantic, mostly, that I think I could easily write a book on historic inns and taverns of Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. So I'm really thinking of writing a book on that subject.
Well, we would love to hear about it, and if you get down to it, we would love to have you back to even discuss that and anything else I humbly throw out there. I'm not asking you to commit. I just want to let you know we have that invite out there. How can viewers learn about you and your various enterprises?
Go to my website, read my bio, and read my blog posts on there. Would probably be the best way. I did blog fairly regularly until COVID, and now I only post on that blog about once a year, if that.
Understood. Our guest tonight has been food and travel writer Kurt Jacobson. Thank you for being our guest on Travel Itch Radio this wonderful evening, March 7th, 2024.
It's been a pleasure. Oh, and I did forget one thing. You asked about airlines.
Oh,
And
yes, I'm sorry.
well, that was my fault. I forgot to put that in, but it is important. As much as I fly, which is about 60,000 miles a year, United is my favorite. And they were just getting slammed about 4 or 5 years ago. And I had the audacity to write a couple of stories about how well I was treated by United. This was before I was a Premier Gold member, even. And I was in Austria 4 years ago for Christmas. We'd been wanting to go to Salzburg because we heard how wonderful that is. And we had a blast. And the day before leaving Austria, this cabbie pulled over on a curve on a dangerous, busy street instead of pulling off and letting us off. And we were all nervous getting out. My wife jumped out and I paid him and I jumped out. He sped off with my passport in the back seat. So it's a traveler's nightmare. And so here I am at the restaurant. We ate lunch. It was not an easy lunch to eat. And then we started making the rounds. We went to the police station. We went to our hotel. We asked some cabbies across the street. And one of the rules that a traveler should have in a foreign country is always get a receipt from your cabbie, because you'll have their identification on there to track them down if you lose something in your taxi cab. So I thought, well, I'll call United Airlines and see what they say. And I told the gal at customer service my situation. And I said, is it possible to get home from Europe without a passport? And she said, I think so. But that's all she had for me. So we didn't get the passport that night. And the next day we had to leave. It was the 3-day New Year's Eve holiday weekend. I called our embassies in 2 different places, Munich and Vienna. They didn't even answer in Munich. And in Vienna, I got a voicemail saying we are shut down for the weekend. So there I was. And we get on the train from Salzburg to Munich, get off right at the airport, walk into the check-in area, and there's someone there before you even go through the queue. The first thing they say is, passport, please. And I said, I lost mine. And the gal just blurts out, oh my God. Can you imagine? Like, I'm not instilled with confidence. But we get to the counter, customer service counter, and it was a Lufthansa code share. It wasn't even a United flight. And we're supposed to fly to Frankfurt and then back to Dulles. And I get this guy who's on loan from Lufthansa who's working the desk for United. And he was my hero, Stefan B. He said, I think we can make this work. He's on the phone for like 20 minutes. And he says, all right, I got you cleared. You can get on. But you have to get through German security. And so let me call them. He calls them up and he says, all right, you should be good to go. And so I go up to security and I tell him, hi, I don't have my passport, but the guy at United called up and said that I'm clear. And he said, I didn't hear anything about this.
Of course.
Long story short, we make it through 2 more hurdles, get to the gate. And not only did Stefan B get us on that plane, but he booked us directly home to Dulles, so we didn't have to go through Frankfurt without my passport, and didn't charge us. And then when we got to the gate, I asked the gal, is there any way my wife can sit with me up in premium economy? And she put my wife up there for free. So you talk about customer service.
Hell yeah, that's great. And definitely a travel hero. Wonderful airline that did that. Stefan B, you mentioned, right?
I have a picture of him in the article I wrote about how United saved me.
Oh, excellent. Then we're going to have to do a little bit of research on that one. I look forward to reading it myself.
I think it's on my blog on the website is where I posted. No one was eager to buy that story, and I just had to get it out there.
Oh, that's a shame. But it's tasteoftravel2.com. It's at the bottom on the ticker, folks. Check it out. And are there any other stories you would like to add?
That was the most exciting one probably of the last 8 years because it really is a traveler's nightmare to lose your passport in a foreign country. And oh, by the way, when we did finally get through the security guys in Munich, they came in and said, all right, it's okay, but there's just one small problem. It's a misdemeanor to travel from another country into Germany by train, and you came into the country without a passport. You can't come in without a passport. And he says, but we'll just waive that. We'll just look the other way on that. All we need is get a copy of your photo you have of your passport on your phone, and you can go. So always take a picture of your passport before leaving home. A nice, clear picture in case you need it. And even though people told us during the situation that won't help you, it did get us home.
Wow. Excellent. Hey, on a personal comment related to that, do you see, and this is way out there, but knowing how technology is catching up in many different ways and other things, do you see the opportunity of a digital passport taking hold anytime soon? Or we're not even there yet? Like I said, this is way out there.
I don't know, but I bet it is going to happen.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't done it yet. I'm hoping to travel internationally very soon, but still going to do the domestic stuff for a while. But wow, excellent. Kurt, I want to thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to say that we're on the cusp of another baseball season. This is the perfect time to place an advance order with Amazon for Dan Schlossberg's new book, Home Run King, The Remarkable Record of Hank Aaron. Dusty Baker wrote the foreword. Folks, that's it for this edition of Travel Itch Radio. Now this is Roger Noriega saying thank you for your time this time until next time. And it's going to be at same time, same place. We'll talk to Lori German about beautiful Glendale, Arizona. For now, good night, stay safe. And we did get a comment from Elizabeth. Thank you for your wonderful interview. Yes, it has been great. And folks, we're going to head on over, check out tasteoftravel2.com and let Kurt know that you saw the interview and or you have read his articles. So for everyone else, we are out.